again to Bob for the beginning of the new cycle. What do you have?
Okay, well, what have I got? Um, you know, Speaking to veterans of the Westchester Poetry Conference during its high water mark as a formalist poetry festival, this is, of course, a shameful thing because it's got we'll call it rhymes, I guess, or the repeating words at the end of the lines the way a sestina would, but that's about it. An unmetered, loose, jangly kind of thing. Um, Wanda Coleman had things she called American sonnets, which were, not sonnets in the strictest sense of the word. We can call this a Canadian sestina, but it's called To the Poets to Make Much of Cheese. And, French heritage, cheese matters. And it begins with a little quote from G.K. Chesterton. Poets have been mysteriously silent on the subject of cheese. So, too much on love and nature, way too much on growing old. With luck, you'll get an apple in a poem. It's a symbol. It comes with subtext, though, not cheddar thinly sliced. A jug of wine, a loaf of bread, and what? No wheel of camembert, just thou? Omar Khayyam, I'd dine out single, solo, sooner than I'd skip the soft cheese course. When poetry falls flat, blame the professors. Fair? Of course. Faculty meeting Colby's sweaty, cubed and past it old. They serve pimento dip at meetings, or worse, craft singles. What would the MFA crowd know? Their cheeses are sad symbols of parsimony on the part of churlish deans. So us, we'll leave them to their curdled tenure. Now take any slice of Dante, an Italian. On every page, a wedge or slice of Asiago, a smear of mascarpone. With him, we course infernal rivers of molten mozzarella, roll 3-foot wheels of God's own Reggiano, 16 months old, to crush the gluttons down in Circle 3. A symbol? Yes, except it isn't there. Abandon all hope of cheese in Dante. A single reference? Not a chance. And Milton, whose single hast maintained the cause of truth? No slice, no spread. And he had Shropshire blue. What better symbol for the white of innocence mottled up with sin, the course of Adam's curse in slow decay? For epic cheese, you must go old, not an aged Gouda, though think of that. Right? No, turn the wheel of time, not cheese, to ancient Greece. Manuri in a way-soft wheel, when Hecamede in Homer's Iliad stood captive, helpless, single and alone, she took her captor Nestor, saw he was frail and old, and stopped before she served the Pramnian wine. A slice of goat milk's cheese grated in your drink. Of course, that's what you need. It worked. A nibble, not a symbol. Thank you very much. No good to nose or tongue a symbol. Menelaus knew it when he tried to tell Telemachus, a wheel upon the highway, a sail upon the sea, set your course to Libya, where lambs have horns at birth, and every single household, master's or man's, has cheese aplenty. Slice it, seize the cheese, get it while you're young and when it's old. Of course, so much depends upon the symbol of the prelapsarian old cheese, the red wheel of Eden's Edom, but all I want's a single, literal slice.
Oh my gosh.
That's a head spinner.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I first of all, I guess poets have been mysteriously silent on the subject of G.K. Chesterton. But I must tell you that, and this goes back to, as I mentioned before, I'm Sicilian American. My grandparents came from Sicily. And of course, cheese is very important there, as is wine and some other things. But I find when I was young, I was a real meat hound, any kind of dead flesh appealed to me. But now in my veteran years, if I had to give something up, I could give up meat, but I absolutely could under no circumstances give up either mushrooms or cheese. So yeah, again, you're preaching to the choir. It's cheese is a sacred thing.
It is. It
You got to
is.
something, right? You know.
Now you're also pretty. You're throwing your illusions around like manhole covers here between Yeats and what's the one right here at the end?
William Carlos Williams.
William Carlos Williams. I mean, there may be more.
John Matthias, a poet who was kind of a mentor to me, once said of a poem of mine that it contained 3 references to Yeats to disguise the 4 references to Wallace Stevens, you know. And that was correct. I can't help it. Everything is always for me about art and literature and mixing them up and drawing things from them. The real world is somewhere farther away, you know.
Well, I will tell you that after you point out the paucity of cheese references in places where we might otherwise expect to find them, where you come down on the use of cheese, which is to say in Homer and in antiquity, again, ties me back to my background because my forebears didn't just come from Sicily, they came from total illiteracy, complete poverty. There's a direct line into antiquity that for me stops at my grandparents who didn't go to school at all. And so I'm the one in the family who would recognize all of these references you're putting into these poems. I'm sure they would be puzzled to see how I turned out just 2 generations after them, because literally the lives that they led had not changed for thousands of years. But they understood cheese, and that's the point.
And you, Bob, you seem to understand cheese. I have to tell you, so you're probably both well aware that this quote of Chesterton's has sparked a number of poems about poetry and cheese, right? I don't know if you've read any of the others, but Light has published some of them. This is the most complete of all of them. It has a much more complete vision for each poet and how they might have taken advantage of the cheese. I love that. I love that. I love the imagination of it. I love imagining the cheese in Dante, especially. I think that would have been a brilliant, but the thing is, cheese is good. So how can it be in hell? I mean, and then it would be molten, right? It would be melting, and that's even better. You know, the pizzas they would be enjoying in hell. It's lovely to contemplate.
I've 2 things to say by way of response, both of which reflect poorly on me. One is that there's a chance that there might be cheese at the very end of the Paradiso, because I read the Inferno, loved it. You know, read the Purgatorio, liked it. I was so bored by Paradise, you know, that I did not read ever the final 2 cantos of the Paradiso. And so for all I know, the crowning glory of the medieval universe is a big wheel of cheese, like a halo, you know.
It's a calzone. Yeah,
it might be there. I couldn't tell you that. Of course, the other thing deeply unflattering is I wrote this poem for this event, so it is looking for a home. Just saying. You know.
This one.
Talk to me. Talk to me.
Okay. It reflects poorly on me as a careerist move, but anyway, thank you so much. Yes, I'm glad. Artisans.
It's so rich on so many levels.
Yeah.
You know, really.
No unintended. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really kind of hits all the notes that you've marked out as important to your personality, all in one, you know, real confection. So thank you. This is, if being on the show was the occasion for you writing this, I almost feel like my work is done. But no, I have to go to Melissa. But thanks for writing this for this occasion. This is
Yeah.
a real occasional poem.
That's amazing to me. Like, oh, I have to write another poem. What should I do? Oh, so I'll just whip out a sestina. I'll just crank one out.
Well, cheese is a
Quasi
powerful muse.
sestina.
I mean, when it's real love, the poem just comes.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, am I up? I guess I'm up.
You are.
Okay. This is another one that has appeared in Lighten Up Online. I think it was over the summer. A couch potato weighs in. On my screen, every household seems blessed with a breakfast of pancakes and fruit. But the kid's late for school and the mom needs no fuel, save for coffee or BritBox, some tea. So 2 mouthfuls are eaten at best as protagonists scurry and scoot. Oh, the stuff that they waste on TV. Next, I'll drool at the sight of a meal. Pasta, veggies, a loaf of hot bread, a guy's made for his date. She says, that smells great. And there's kissing and chests popping free as the entree begins to congeal and they feast on each other instead. Oh, the stuff that they waste on TV. Plus, each show has a sauce that gets burned, or a pie that gets thrown in a fight, or a cake that, good God, is smashed flat by some clod, or a produce stand gorgeous to see, till of course the whole thing's overturned in a chase, melons flung from a height, or a banquet for grand jubilee, where a terrible secret's discerned amid gasps and farewell appetite. All the guests leave in haste after barely a taste. So then always it falls upon me to atone for such sins, and I've learned to run straight to the fridge for a bite. Oh, the waste that they stuff on TV.
It's great.
Thank you.
You know, I applauded you before for concealing some food, excuse the pun, food for thought, in the midst of your work. But as I heard you read this, something that struck me is that we're not all the same age. I'm older than the two of you, but I think we grew up during a time when food was viewed, if not as sacred per se, certainly as something important and essential. And one of the things that you're pointing out in this poem, Melissa, is that the sacred nature of food, or its natural importance, is eroded and undercut by the way it's treated in the things that are presented to us. And what I wonder about is whether in the future, I mean, I think about a couple of generations of kids growing up, not sitting at dinner with their parents, but each person eating on the fly, doing something, having a different schedule. And I think that what all of this tends to do is to demystify and undercut, again, the natural importance of food and the ritual nature of eating beyond just the biological necessity. And I wonder whether in the future, people won't get the unspoken message here, which is that food is important and it shouldn't be wasted, and it shouldn't just be thrown around.
I love your apparent assumption that people will be reading this poem in the future.
But you understand what I'm saying? I mean, this is something I fear, is that the general that eating will become a specialized activity for those people who want to distinguish themselves from the masses by some means, and that it'll degenerate into just as satisfying of biological necessities, and that actually the things that we see on TV that you go out of your way to chide for being brought to us actually is, I mean, it's funny, but it's actually having a bad effect that in the future may become a more serious effect. So maybe that isn't what you had in mind, but that's the way I took it. I mean, in the midst of all of the, I mean, the craft here is predictably brilliant, you know.
Thank you.
It's
Yeah, I mean,
better
so
than
Very
I
kind.
it's better than I thought it was at first, because I will confess I didn't get that little chiasmus, that reversal, like the
Oh,
stuff, the waste, they stuff. I blew past it the first time I read it and just thought it's a refrain. That's nice, but it's, A B becomes B A, right? That's the chiasmus, isn't it?
I'm
Yeah.
Anyway,
very bad at all those terms. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm obviously someone who gets interested in these things and then forgets about them. But I think that's what it is. Anyway, I just got that. So agreeing on the craft.
Well, thank you.
I might be able to spare you some small amount of despair about all the TV that's wasted on, or food that's wasted on television.
Yeah.
I found out from a student of mine who had an internship in Hollywood that none of the food you see in commercials or shows or anything like that is real, because real food
Oh, yeah.
looks terrible and revolting. It's like when
Yeah.
you see a diner menu and they have photos of
Yeah.
everything, that aren't terribly professional, and you think, why would anyone order that? And of course, the images that you're looking at when you see a ad for, I don't know, Olive Garden, it's food porn. It's not real food.
Yeah.
Oh, you knew all that already.
Well,
Okay.
I knew that, but there is always some real giant burger in front of, say, each of the Gilmore Girls, but forget it. But yeah, I've had that experience. Years ago, I was doing interviews for an article I was doing for the Times in a little town in New Jersey. And this wonderful carnival was in the center of town. And it had like baked goods and stuff. And I couldn't wait to stop by there after I finished my interviews. And I get over there and I discover that all these delicious looking brownies and pies and so on are shellacked. And it was a movie set for a Renee Zellweger movie. So I had firsthand experience with that. Plus I came up in journalism, and I'm friends with a number of photographers who have done that, like food styling. And yeah, it's very sad to see what's done to food in the name of photography and cinema.
I don't know if either of you grew up watching the Three Stooges, but I guess it's a male sin of males of a certain age. But they would have these epic food fights, and at the very least, they were really plates of whipped cream.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe that it was whipped cream because they were eating it, off their faces after they'd been hit with it. But that was one of the very early. It was a kind of subterranean excitement to see food disrespected at that point, because of course those films were all made during the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was this extra layer of sin involved in treating food like that. But I mean, it tweaked up, the impact of the surreal nature of what they were doing, because it was the thing that no one could afford to, you wouldn't do and couldn't do.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and that's what, in a way, that's what I'm suggesting may be lost as we continue to go forward, because of what I was saying before, because the whole way in which our relationship to food has changed in the last couple of generations, and I don't think for the better.
Well, there is the slow food movement. And of course, climate change could take us in either direction, right? Like food just gets markedly worse for everyone, or we get our acts together.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's already in place a lot of genetic manipulation that is going to make familiar foods much harder and more able to withstand the change in the climate. But I have not read any article that tells me how that will affect their flavor or the way that they respond to being cooked. So I may live long enough to learn about that for myself. I may not. I suspect the two of you will. So let's see. Okay, I'm up to my next. Oh, this is a very quick one. This one is about food, but it's really about something else. And this is called eating halva. I do love halva. I like it when it's coated with chocolate too, but not white chocolate.
Thank you.
I don't think that's been done, and that would be wrong. Anyway, eating halva. I bought some halva and divided it, some to eat now, some to save for later. I still expect a future where I can eat the halva I have saved. But soon a day will come when I'm no longer sure I'll be alive to finish what's been saved. When I've lost faith in time, will I be changed? And having bought some halva, eat it all.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Food and mortality. Such a classic combination. But I
guess I could have called it
halva, not green bananas.
Yeah, I mean, well, the green bananas has been used. Right. So I wanted something different. I guess I could have called it halva and the fear of death, but I didn't want to go that far.
Thank you for not doing that.
A little on the nose, right?
Yeah,
But
a little on the nose.
It is sort of your carpe diem poem, or at least your poem that asks, will I carpe the diem when the time comes, right?
Yeah, in fact, just if you're curious from a personal standpoint, I hope I never reach that point. I hope I continue. I think the key phrase is faith in time, losing faith. Of course, it's not in time. It's in my ability to stay in time. Mm-hmm. But I hope that I'm always thinking that there will be time enough to finish the halva. But, Ray Charles had a great quote where he said, you better live each day like it's going to be your last, because one of these days you're going to be right.
Yeah. Well, if you've got halva in your refrigerator on that day, that's golden. I love halva too.
Yeah.
And to me, it's as evocative of childhood as Bob's blackberries. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Please. No, go ahead.
It never lasts long enough around my place for me to know what is the shelf life on that.
Well,
hard to know.
It doesn't last that long. I mean, I will divide it up, and I'll eat half today and half tomorrow or the next day. I don't think I've ever been able to go very many days without. If it's there, I eat it. The only way that I am able to budget my halva consumption is by not buying it.
Yeah, those are words that shouldn't be in a sentence together. Budget and halva. No.
Someone's going to know the shelf life. We'll follow the comment stream after this goes on YouTube.
Yeah, I will say that there's something about halva that, I mean, obviously, I could have called this eating any one of 1,000 things, but I do this thing with halva. I do divide it, and it didn't occur to me to change the food. But I don't think it would have quite the same, texture, so to speak, if it wasn't halva, because halva is like nothing else.
Mm-hmm. It's like delicious sand.
Yeah. I mean, the texture is what makes it for me. I mean, there are other things as sweet or more sweet. I mean, it's a plus for me that it isn't too sweet. But it's the texture and the way that it crumbles is also interesting, because it reminds me simultaneously of ice, ice ice shelves collapsing, and the same thing happens with certain minerals when you hit it with a hammer. It kind of shards fall off it. And for me, that's what it's like for halva. I always have a hard time making a very clean cut when I'm dividing the halva.
Yeah,
There's always crumbly remains that want to leap
Yeah.
out.
yeah. It's like a coastline that's
Yeah.
eroding. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
It's,
well, this
it's,
is,
it's really an ancient food, isn't it? I mean, it's
yes.
Persian and it been around for at least centuries, probably thousands
Oh,
of
it's
years.
it's thousands of years. I mean, there are many of the Sufi parables talk about halva, eating halva.
Well,
So,
if I remember correctly, my friend Ahmad Sadri, who translated one of the great Persian epics by Ferdowsi, I think he said it's mentioned there. It's one of the foods that's mentioned there. So, I mean, that matters to the poem, right? Like you're participating, you're talking about mortality, but you're participating in something ancient it's been around centuries before us.
yeah.
It's going to be around centuries after us, I'm sure, one way or another.
Yeah.
That isn't going to mess with halva, right?
Well, thank you, because I think you're putting your finger on why I like the fact that it's halva and not something else. You're clarifying to me why I chose it, because I think you're exactly right. I think of it as an ancient food and eating it as being part of an ancient tradition. And that appeals to me because for some reason Doritos don't have quite the same.
Give them time.
I don't eat Doritos, don't get me wrong. But wow. Well, this is it turns out that we're a very good audience for each other's poems on this topic. So thank you. I'm very much enjoying the reactions I'm getting to these things, which most of these poems I've never read aloud because they're a little outside the running of the mill. But you're good respondents. So let's go into the last round. And what do we have from our new guest for his parting shot?
Well, it's only sort of from me. There's a book coming out this fall from the heroic and wonderful Mad Hat Press of translations that I did along with a fellow by the name of Jean-Luc Garneau. And we translated, and here's why Mad Hat is heroic, because when I say what it is, you're going to realize that they didn't choose this for marketing reasons. They chose this because this was good literature. A book of Belgian surrealist prose poems from the 1950s. That's what they're bringing out.
Wow, a beach read.
Right, and it's wonderful that they're surrealists because they're identical twins, which is a little surreal, right? Brothers, Gabriel and Marcel Piqueret. The book's going to be called, in French, it's Au-delà des gestes, which in English would be Beyond Gestures, which is probably going to be the title. I'm tempted to call it the Piqueret dossier because it has a little ring to it. But they are also abducted from the 1950s to the 1920s and appear in this novel of mine that makes a great gift for anyone, which is set in the Paris, where you have two surrealists, Gabriel and Marcel, who are only sort of like the real guys. But anyway, so this is not like me, except that it's me digging into somebody else's work of literature, which is kind of what I do, along with Jean-Luc. And it's the closest thing I could find in that collection to a poem about cooking, because it's set in a kitchen. That's about all that happens that connects with cooking. They have some crazy poems about riding bicycles through ripped up cabbage in some surrealist way, but they don't excerpt well. You'd be here for 20 minutes and it's not everyone's cup of tea. But this is from their prose poems. A lot of the imagery is sort of fairy tale-ish, and they have the logic of dreams. There's strange things that feel like they come together. And what is it? I think it was Jung who spoke of these things as being pregnant with meaning, like it feels like meaning is about to be born, right? And then
Yeah.
maybe it doesn't get there. So this is a little short one by them, which Jean-Luc and I have translated as What Happens in a Golden Summer, Gabriel and Marcel Picoret. The princess passes, a visit to the Hall of Mirrors. The guards are there smoking their pipes. She takes a pipe from one of them, tastes it. It is unpleasantly bitter. There's blood on the pipe. The princess passes, a visit to the geometric gardens. Dukes, barons, and marquises loiter by the hedges. The August evening is thick with lilac. Her breast heaves as she takes in the scented air. There's blood on the lilacs. The princess passes, a visit to the kitchens. There she finds boards laden with roasted joints, orange peel, pheasant feathers, sage bouquets, the smell of garlic, the scent of burning evergreens, clouds of gnats. Two servants fight behind the princess. Their struggle is fierce and cunning. One of them pulls out a knife and hurls it at his rival. The blade whirls through the air, misses its goal. The princess is hit, cries out, and falls dead, the dagger in her back. A storm bursts over all of France. There is blood in the king's kitchens.
Hmm.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Well,
I'm
it
not
is
sure
poetic.
more response than who, you know.
I love the sensory details in this poem, like so many of your poems today, and yours, Al. It just, you can taste it, smell it, hear it, and it is very fairy tale-ish.
Well, I may be one of the, and I, in this statement, I include the originators of this, who may very well not have had this in mind at all. But what this did for me, and it's a fairly rare reference, but there's a one-act opera in Hungarian by Bartók called Bluebeard's Castle. Do you know it, Bob?
It's been a while. But,
well, here's the thing.
Me, that one room, yeah.
Yeah, here's the thing. It's a riff. It was written by Béla Balázs, but it's a riff on the fairy tale of Bluebeard. And in the original fairy tale, the French version of the fairy tale that most people know it by, the young wife is brought to Bluebeard, and it turns out that he's murdered his earlier set of wives. But what's different about the Balázs version of the story, and for me, it's a heartrending and very compelling difference, is that the woman Judith, who comes to marry and live with Bluebeard in his older age, and he has had 3 wives previously, all of whom have disappeared and are presumed to have been killed. The story is similar to the original tale in that there are rooms that she's asked not to go into.
Right.
And of course, she goes into each of these rooms. And in one of the rooms, she enters and sees what looks like an opulent and wide-ranging garden with all kinds of flowers. But then she looks more closely, and there's blood on all the petals of the flowers. And she goes into another room that is an armory, and there are weapons of war and armor. And she's taken aback. And then she looks more closely, and there's blood on all the armor and all the weapons. And then she enters another room, and there's a lake that she understands is a lake of tears. So she's seized by the feeling that she's married a person who is going to do away with her. But what it turns out to be is that, like his other wives, Bluebeard, who has asked for the trust of his wives to not go into these rooms, has felt betrayed by each of them, and puts them away. He puts crowns on them and puts them away in another room as queens, although they're quite defunct. And it turns out that the blood on the flowers and on the armor is his blood, and the lake is all his tears. And it's all an expression of his own personal suffering that's been misunderstood. So when I saw the imagery of this, I automatically thought of that. And I have so much emotional response. I've been trained to respond to the blood in the kitchens, blood on the pipe, blood on the lilacs. That that immediately conjures up for me the idea not of violence, but of suffering and sacrifice. So I don't know whether they had any of that in mind or were even aware of, when was this written?
This would be the 50s, the late 50s. I would have to check because there's some poems in that collection from the 60s, but I'm pretty sure this is a 1950s poem.
Okay. It's at least possible because Bartok died right after the war, so it could be. But
if it's a reference, then you've made me do something I thought was not possible, which is like the Piqueret twins even more. Because I love any arcane sort of set of references. I had always just read it, the blood where it shouldn't be, and then eventually something that, even though the time is wrong, it makes the other things into foreshadowing, even though it couldn't be. I saw that as a kind of a dream logic, right? Where there are images that don't make sense, and then they can reveal themselves later, and they come together their own kind of logic. But if it's also a reference to Bartok, and I love the whole Bluebeard story because it's the essence of narrative tension, right? You can open any door in my castle while I'm out. Just don't open that door.
Yes.
You've got to open that door. That has to happen, right? Like Red Riding, prohibition and a violation. That's narrative,
As luck would have it, I love that opera. It's in Hungarian, so I don't understand Hungarian, but I'm so taken with that imagery and with that version of the story, that the play that I'm rehearsing right now, which is an audio verse play that will appear next year, is called Bluebeard's Ghost. And what I've done is what Howard Hawks did when he came, when he took the movie The Front Page and changed the character of Hildy. What is it? Maybe Hildy Thompson. Anyway, it's a male in the earlier movie. Then when he made the movie with Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell, he changed that newspaper man into a newspaper woman. So what I've done is I've flipped the concept so that my central character is a woman who's had 3 husbands, and they've all died under mysterious circumstances, and she's thought to be a black widow. But as it turns out, she also is innocent of those events.
Spoiler for those.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But the title gives it away, I think, for anybody that that is interested. But that's how much I like the story.
Title again?
Bluebeard's Ghost.
Okay.
So you will know what it means. Other people will go, what the hell has that got to do with this? But anyway, I love that. So I'm sorry about the long digression, but that's when I first read this, that's just jumped out at me. And I said, gee, I wonder if they could possibly have, known that there was a connection. But I'm sure surrealists would love it even if they didn't know, and the connection exists anyway.
Well, as I often say when we come to a question that I can't answer, more research funding, please. I will happily look into this. Give me a Guggenheim or something, and I'll be on it. A Fulbright will do.
God bless you for being willing to fight those battles. Like I said, I stayed in high school. I didn't I didn't, it's left me a free hand to do what I wanted, and that's turns out to have been a good thing. But we need good people out there jousting at the windmills of more funding, and let that be you, Bob. Okay, well, so that means for your final offering, you have for us what, Melissa?
Well, the last one will be from this collection, The Witch
Oh, that's
Demands Your
great.
Attraction, which is fairy tale reboots for adults in verse. And there is a poem in there, which is a retelling of Bluebeard from a hipster perspective. But
Really?
I'm not reading that one. That doesn't have, it does actually have to do with food, but I'm reading another one that has to do with food. I think it'll be pretty obvious which story this is from with the first couple words. It's called Fed Up. Red Riding Hood's grandma had chest pains galore, cholesterol looming at 244, and blood pressure spikes. Though she kept it all quiet, her daughter found out and imposed a strict diet. No more would she bundle Red off with a pail of cookies for Granny. Instead, she sent kale and casseroles ranging from foul to insipid because she had stripped them of every known lipid. One day Red arrived to find Granny in bed. "Come closer, my dumpling," the dowager said. Forget the lame cover-up tale that came later. No wolf gobbled Red. It was Granny who ate her.
By the way, the use of dumpling is just right. It's just the right bit of foreshadowing.
Thank you.
But I'm just very glad you did the granny voice. You know, I never used to do voices when I would do any kind of reading until I became a father. And you're reading bedtime stories and you do all the critters in their voices, which did cause me embarrassment. I was reading Musée des Beaux-Arts, the Auden poem, to my students, and you get to the mention of Icarus, and just out of impulse from having done sound effects on reading, you know, Icarus falling from the sky, I found myself going, ah, I chanted down the chimney, and which is chanted down the chimney, and the Archambeau tradition is always terrifying. Ah, but the performance feature, you know, and it's so nice. I love retellings of fairy tales. Probably my favorite book of short stories is Angela Carter's Bloody Chamber, which is dark and gothic and horrifying versions of fairy tales, because that's all implicit there. And this goes in different direction to kind of brightness and wit. And that's lovely to see that, you know, those stories can take you in such different directions and still be that story.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to think of new perspectives on old stories, isn't it?
Well, you know, a lot of times the original versions of those old stories got sanitized along the way.
Oh yes, oh
and
yes.
so really you're returning to the earlier sensibility, but with a twist. And you've updated it, but you've restored, you know, you've restored the real grisly nature and danger of reality that was there for children, that children instinctively respond to and understand.
They do.
Life is mortal, you know, that you know, the witches are out to kill you. And I've never thought that sanitizing the stories to make them more palatable did a service to anybody, especially the children that were going to be, again, excuse the pun, consuming them.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's a wonderful middle-aged horror, right? You look at cholesterol looming at 244. Those of us taking rosuvastatin are like, that's terrifying. That's a bad number.
Cholesterol is the big ogre now. It's true.
Yes, well.
I smell the low HDL of the Englishman. Yeah.
Well, I must say that You did do a tiny bit of bandwagon jumping when you used kale, because kale has really become the whipping boy of modern scorn. Is that not fair to say?
I think that I love kale. I will say it straight up. I am a fan. But I don't think it's a good substitute for cookies.
Well,
You
it's
know.
getting a lot of bad press in general, though. I mean, it's used casually as something that nobody wants
Yeah.
to eat because it's good for us.
It's
So,
true. It's true.
but you know, you're doing these heroic couplets, and you did have pale. So there you go.
Yeah. What else was I gonna do?
Yeah, no, this is again, this is really fun. But and again, I've come back to this with virtually all of your poems. There is also something else at work here, and in a sense, while entertaining us, you're restoring the end of the tale with a child being eaten instead of, you know, somebody tripping off to the playground. So I appreciate that. I think it's important to get back to
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, even what the Hansel and Gretel pushed the witch into the oven, right? Isn't that how it went?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't rehabilitate her and invite her to dinner.
No, no. I mean, even the popular versions of a lot of the fairy tales are kind of violent still, but it's true. The kids tend to come out okay. Not in all of my versions, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm liking it. Let's just
Thank
I'm
you.
on record as liking that decision on your part, because you could have gone in a number of directions.
Thank you.
Well, shall I bring us to the final note
Yeah.
here? Okay, this is this really summarizes a lot about my childhood and the progress of my life. And it's quite an old poem. It's at least 30 or 35 years old. But it's also still true. So there is that. It's called Getting the Eggplant Right. And of course, I did grow up with eggplant. Getting the eggplant right. Behind me, wooden chest of magic spells on yellow 3x5-inch index cards. The shorthand fashioned from my mother's eyes, the understood directions left unsaid. Before me, blackness verging into purple and plumped out to the skin, the mystery of eggplant thumped against my fingernail. I guess I have utensils for the job. Within me, the uncertainty that comes of inexperience, and deeper down, the doubt. Magicians work uncanny spells, and all through childhood, I'd been witness to my mother's magic. How could I presume to do myself what only she could do? Her cooking had observed the unities as classically as Aeschylus. It looked, smelled, tasted, and satisfied, all of a piece, and nourished me as well. Like little else encountered in this world, in every way, it was exactly what it seemed to be. My buddies lingering in mealtimes knew. I always counted myself blessed at birth. My mother had been gone for 7 years before I thought to try her recipes. I'd long since given up those tastes for dead, as irretrievable as Christmas from the 50s. I'd provided for myself, for decades, cooked for women too, the ones whose generation thought it servitude instead of celebration. And against my mother's standard, what I did in haste could never qualify as genuine. Some people eat to live, she used to say, while others live to eat. It was her art. I stood over the trimmed medallions, salt shaker in hand, and watched the sweat bead up, then patted them with paper towels, dipped in egg and breadcrumbs, lightly fried to dark oat color, layered in a baking dish with thin cut slabs of ropey mozzarella, alternating milky white and brown, then drowned in the tomato red, a sauce smelling of crushed herbs and hard grated cheese. A trip to the preheated oven then, where, covered, it could bubble up at will. The volume of the kitchen filled with warmth, aroma, and the melody of hope. You'll call it ordinary sorcery to get the eggplant right. What one may do, another may repeat. Ingredients insensible can't recognize the hand that shapes and chooses them. The laws of heat, anonymous, work on in no one's name. There is no magic touch. At best, we are the agents of the urge that brings to being according to the way things have to be. But taste it. Tell me that it's not the same as when I came in after playing ball until it got too dark, the week before we kids went back to school. Well, you can say that anyone could make it taste this way. Think what you want. Or taste the truth again. How does the universal work on earth except by way of local blessings? How else does it choose its agents? I don't know. I claim no special virtue for my mother or for me. But after what has sprung from her hands and from mine, I know we share a closeness now we never could before. And while the song of eggplant in the mouth, a chime that's come to many, patiently can wait to be repeated, rung anew in people not yet born, I lift a fork, and in a bite, my childhood lives again. After the years of hopelessness, I find what I recover pierces to the root.
Hmm. Oh. So touching. Hmm.
It was a great day when I got it right. Because I thought I would never taste that taste again.
Oh.
But it's only sort of about taste, right? I mean, like going into this, when I first read it, I thought, all right, this is going to be a kind of a Proust Madeleine, right? Like a taste that unlocks a lot of other thoughts.
Yes.
But it's not just that, right? It's also about the action of creating it. Your hands doing what her hands did, and
Yes.
and so it's got that not just on the consumption end of it, but on the creation end of it element, which I think is really nice.
Well, and
I
it's
agree.
the magic of creation that I thought I would not be able to participate in, because I looked up to her. You know, this was what she did was magic, and so it's also about coming into a realization of a kind of shared identity.
Mm-hmm.
As I say, a closeness that we couldn't have shared before, because it was predicated on action, on doing the thing, not on some experience that came to you.
I love that idea. Yeah. I love that idea of a communion, posthumous communion. It's similar to what you get from reading, right? A long dead writer, and feeling as if you're communicating with them, and they're alive in your mind, and you're bringing your mother back, communicating with her.
Yeah, it does also, as you say, it does also have that parallel to the experience of connecting with another through reading. But it has that extra dimension of now I've become an honorable apprentice, you know.
Definitely. I love some of your phrases in this are just so great. Ordinary sorcery. It reminds me of the writer Ruth Reichel talking about the alchemy of baking. There is no magic there. It's miraculous every time you throw these ingredients in a pan and they turn into something else, and you've nailed that. And how does the universal work on earth except by way of local blessings? I love that too. I love that.
Well, it's the only place where I see them. I mean, I see that at work, and it is in the details. But yeah, it's how it is true that there are some people that can't cook. You know, and I understand that you say a green pepper is a green pepper. You know, the ingredients don't know you. You know, the pan doesn't, the fire doesn't know you. But another part of me says, no, that's all nonsense. It's all you and the food working together. I mean, I go all the way back to those ancient cultures that, you know, praise the animal as they kill and prepare to eat it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that it's all of a piece. It's not you and the outside world and you providing for yourself by raping it and taking things. It's collaboration. And that's where the nourishment comes from. So on all those levels, this for me was a very good personal metaphor for talking about the relationship that I came to have with my mother after she was dead. Hmm. I got closer to her after she was dead. And it just shows that there are powers untouched by death. Hmm. I mean, not everything is, but some things are not. So that's why I wanted to end with this, because, you know, as the honcho here, I get to do the last piece. And this is my way of honoring my mom and all of my friends. They literally used to hang out in hopes that they'd be asked to stay for dinner, because they knew that when they left my house, they had to go back to inferior dinners. That's not a lie. They'll admit to this freely. Not that their moms weren't nice women, but they didn't love it. They thought of it as they thought of it as a duty. And you know, there also is a little bit, it's just one little reference, but there is a little reference about that, you know, my mother's generation saw this as a celebration, an opportunity for family to bond, and that we've moved progressively away from that.
But now kind of coming back to it, there is the trad wife movement. And of course, so many more people now cook as a hobby, right? They glory in making some fancy dish from the New York Times, you know, on the weekend or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you can it's limitless in its potential for transformation, because it's so basic to our lives that food and the preparation of food can stand for a whole lot of things. And, you know, for people for whom it's an addiction, it's not a good thing that it stands for. But it can be put to the most noble of uses, and it can go on and mean things beyond what it does to merely nourish the body. So this, again, soul food, that's what this poem is about, is soul food in a very particular way. Anything that I make, and there aren't that many things that I'm able to make from my mother's recipes, but the few things that I can make, they're like time machines.
Well, I don't have a lot to add except to say, by way of time machines, the little wooden box of index cards is a fantastic time machine. And I thought I'd just bring the ancestral Archambeau box.
Oh, great! Looks just like it.
Oh yeah, right. You know, we begin with Sailor Duff, which is a lot of eggs and molasses, so you can't go too wrong. But it is a kind of you know, you mentioned the one in your poem where you can barely read the handwriting and it's written in a kind of shorthand just for her. Yeah. On the one hand, that's alienating. You can't find your way in. On the other hand, that just makes it more personal. These are private documents, right, of hers for herself. So you're really getting into her inner world that way, which I think is just really touching, you know.
Yeah, that's really true. I have 6 cousins who are between 10 and 20 years younger than I am. and I'm an only child. So once I went off to school, my mother wasn't able to cook for me anymore, but she gloried in cooking a lot for my cousins. And when she died, I inherited all of these index cards. And I have friends who are bookbinders, and we made a cookbook where they scanned the handwritten recipes. And the cookbook was made up out of these recipes in my mother's handwriting. And the sections are set off with photographs of my cousins at different stages of their childhood, photographs of my parents and me. And I have given, we only made 12 copies, but I gave a copy to each of my cousins. And some years ago, we had a memorial dinner in which the admission was that you made something from the book.
Oh, what a great idea.
So it was on what would have been my mother's 100th birthday or something like that. And so the idea was that we would celebrate her with her own recipes. And we only did it once, but we did do it. So, yeah. Well, thank you for giving us a chance to cover. I mean, we really kind of covered the topic from many angles, and we have lots of different things to say. But such terrific company and good fellowship, I could not wish for better. So I'm gonna draw things to a close, and
I'm gonna go eat prunes in defiance of Melissa's poem. I'm gonna go eat prunes.
And I'm gonna go eat chocolate before I eat a cherry. No, I'm not really.
That's pretty
I do
funny.
have a recipe to share with both of you that involves chocolate and cherries, however.
Oh, great. All right. So now officially, I'm going to conclude the recording, and then we can say our goodbyes momentarily.